The warehouse is open. Tales from the Warehouse, Volume 64. Meet Matt. Came up with a clever name. Pretty funny stuff. It's Matt Kass from MeiGray, MeiGray.com, where, by the way, as we draw ever closer to the season, get on the request list. Aside from the partner clubs, we always like to tell you, you never know who is going to wind up with whom at whatever point in time. Sales at MeiGray.com, requests list, get them in right now. Matt Kass, welcome inside the warehouse, my friend. You're one of the new kids on the block, pardon the terrible dad humor. We are glad to have you in here. Thanks for coming aboard, sir.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on the podcast. I'm excited to talk a little bit about my collection, my background, and, maybe preview the season and throw out some hot takes that'll prove to eventually be wrong.
I'm here for all of it. You are with MeiGray. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And again, we can sort of do this in chronological order, but give me some of the background, the Matt round. All right, I got a million of these. I'm just going to stop right now. Go ahead, Mr. Kass.
It's all good. I'm a fan of good puns myself. So, New Jersey, born and raised, and as a result of that, being a hockey fan was never really a choice. It was more of a duty or a familial lineage to pick up. My first hockey game that I ever went to was when I was 2 months old. My grandmother actually took me to the Devils Senators game in April of 1996 at the Meadowlands, pretty much right when the pediatrician said he can be in large crowds. So I've lived it, breathed it, I eat it, I sleep it. The minute the leaves start turning and the temperature gets a little bit colder, I'm raring and ready to go. So graduated from high school in Springfield, went down to college at Rowan in Glassboro. And, I like to joke that I'm kind of a product of Jersey. I've been in North Jersey. I've been in South Jersey. Branchburg is, controversially, as some might say, in Central Jersey. So I've seen it all and done it all. So that's really kind of a little bit of my background and where I come from, before we even getting into my credentials and my work experience.
All right, we'll get to those credentials in a second. Tell me a little bit about your role at MeiGray. What exactly is your title, sir?
Absolutely. Well, I wear a couple hats like a lot of other people do in the sales department. So I'm a senior editorial associate and sales associate. I report directly to Dave and Drew, who many of our listeners have called on the phone. I fill out copy on jerseys before they go onto the website. I double check copy from Dave and Drew. I'm in charge of picking up the phone, handling calls, running into the warehouse, to retrieve a jersey. You name it, anything that needs to get done. I pretty much do it, aside from the authentication of jerseys, though it's, those are the guys upstairs. But anything downstairs, if you've ever come into to the office to take a tour, to buy a jersey, grab a stick, starting in May when I was hired, that I'm one of the faces you're going to see down there.
This is a good thing. And this is why and again, I've been a MeiGray, aside from having the honor of hosting these podcasts, 64 episodes and growing, I've been a longtime client. I always do like the fact, and I'll speak for a lot of the customers, a lot of the client base. We always like to meet the people that we're talking to. And so when I was approached to do this particular podcast, I'm like, this is a great idea, because MeiGray and the memorabilia business and you guys always speak of transparency, and you guys always speak of the building of the relationships and the trustworthiness and the whatnot. It's always really cool, Matt, to get to chat, to get to know. So I look at this episode as super helpful, because you're one of the new faces around there. As you mentioned, you've only been in there since May. And what drew you to the MeiGray family?
Well, I actually started out as a customer before I became an employee, like a lot of people who ended up joining, in some capacity. I bought a handful of jerseys, two of which are actually on the wall behind me right now, which our audio listeners, unfortunately, will not be able to see. Our video people will be able to, so I'll just describe them very briefly. It's Jesper Bratt's jersey from 2000 Cup Night back in 2020, when they had the 20th anniversary. And this is Emily Janiga's blue jersey from the NWHL bubble in 2021, where the league played a couple games in Lake Placid before a COVID infection kind of ripped through a number of the teams and forced a postponement of the tournament that year. So these are both one-game wonders, just from different circumstances entirely. And we're going to have a couple other jerseys that I'm going to be displaying tonight as well. But, I figured these were two of the best ones. They got two of the coolest stories behind them. And, as a fan of the Devils, And I'll kind of tease here, having worked for the Riveters, that's kind of the focus of my collection for the most part is those two teams.
So back to the what drew you there. Again, you started as a client and you're like, "Hey, you guys are looking." And I have, and we'll get to the history and sort of the work history in the background. You're like, "I think there could be a there." And much like all of us, we're always fascinated as to what goes on there, what goes on behind the scenes, and because we all love the hobby so very much, this always makes for a not a heartwarming tale, but like a cool tale. I love pizza. I'd like to work at a pizza place. I love donuts. I'd like to work at a Dunkin' Donuts or a Krispy Kreme or a Duck or whatever your pleasure. Like, I love hockey sweaters and I like memorabilia. I'd love to be in MeiGray all the time for my job. I do love what I do during the day now, but this is like a dream come true for a lot of people. Tell me a little bit how you found your there.
Well, it was actually working with the Riveters. I started by meeting Dave, who was handling the NWHL and later PHF program. You strike up a conversation with people at the rink, and the biggest thing is really just having personal skills and knowing how to chat and converse and build a working relationship. And when the time came, I reached out, I gave him a call, I said, I'm getting ready to make that next move in my career, find that next level. Um, I had actually interviewed for a position before that just wasn't quite the right fit, but I kept my name in the hopper and I basically, reached out to Dave. I said, "Is there anything we can do to get this process started?" He's like, "Yeah, we're looking to hire." And so a couple of months of back and forth, waiting for the right circumstance to open up, waiting for the right position to open in the sales department. And then, I got the offer letter and I pretty much read it once just to make sure that all the words were in the right place. And then I signed it and sent it back. I didn't even need to think about it.
Yeah, it's like, pinch me. This is real. I'm going to go work for MeiGray. This is really, really cool. What were you doing with the Riveters, by the way, just to help build up that resume?
Yeah, so I actually worked as a communications assistant. So I was writing game previews,
Hmm.
recaps, player features, a very writing based role. And in addition, I was going to the Mall at American Dream, the second season, and Barnabas Hockey House the first year I worked with them. And I was providing game day volunteer type aspects. If they needed someone to run sticks or a piece of equipment. I worked the penalty box one game, and while I was doing that, I was also simultaneously live tweeting the game on the team's Twitter account. So I'm here like, player so and so is in the penalty box, and I'm getting ready to release them, and I'm like, and the penalty comes to like I open the door, they go out, I close it, and then I tweet penalty comes to an end. It was anything and everything, much like MeiGray. And I think that really prepared me well for not only the writing based role that I find myself in now, but also kind of handling whatever, was thrown at me. There wasn't any circumstance that I'm unprepared for simply because of the time I spent there. And in another job, which I'll get to a little bit later in the podcast, I've had a lot of unique experiences in the world of sports.
This is a cool thing. We're talking to Matt Kass. It's Telsman Warehouse, Volume 64. Meet Matt. Matt, Senior Editorial and Sales Associate at MeiGray. You can reach Matt at mcass@meigray.com,
That's correct.
Kass. Also, by the way, quick email to sales@meigray.com. Get you on the request list for the coming season. The partner teams, the non-partner teams, you never know what's going to wind up in the treasure trove that is the warehouse up at MeiGray. So your story reminds me a little bit of a good friend's story who's now working for, let's say, a national gambling network. And at the time, he was the play-by-play guy for the Frederick Keys, minor league baseball, Orioles affiliate before. Then they were disaffiliated when MLB did their contraction a couple of years ago. And now Frederick once again will be, not breaking news. It happened about a month or two ago, maybe a little less. At any rate, my buddy Tim was the play-by-play voice, and he used to tell me, much like you, I'm in the penalty box, I'm running the gate, I'm running the door, I'm keeping time, I'm doing this, and I'm live tweeting. During a rain delay, Matt, Tim would leave the broadcast booth to help pull tarp. People don't know what the backstories really are, and they're always so fascinating. So I'm glad you've got that experience. So now we enter into the world of memorabilia. You showed us the Brat and the Aniga from, both one gamers, but doesn't bother. It shouldn't bother anyone. They're special in their own right. You don't even have to give the one game qualifier unless you're looking to sell them, and then you can just tell the whole story. They're beautiful, and thank you for sharing. And I'm looking forward to the next stuff. So when you're old enough to be in public spaces, you go to a game. How did the memorabilia or game worn bug bite you?
That's actually a really good question. So for a while, I knew that the team had equipment. I'm a Devils fan, been a Devils fan
Mhm.
for a long time. So I was aware of Lou Lamoriello's yard sale back in the 90s and 2000s, where they'd send everything, sticks and skates and helmets and what have you, out on the floor of the arena after they drained all the ice and cleared it away. And people would go and get memorabilia for their collection. But it never quite occurred to me that the jerseys are their own thing. And so down the line, it's like March of 2020 in the 2019-2020 season. I go to a Riveters game and I see the team has a fifth anniversary patch on their jersey. I look online, they're not offering the fifth anniversary patch on the replica jerseys. So I'm like, how do I get my hands on that fifth anniversary patch? It's sublimated on the jersey. There's no possible way that I can just get it as a casual fan. So then I go searching and I'm like, where can I find this? And sure enough, MeiGray, which was the official partner program of the NWHL/PHF. So I went online, I bought a jersey. I'm like, who should I get? There's no real science behind who I picked. I just figured it was a player that was good. And I actually have that jersey right here with me. If I can hold it up in front of the camera and show it.
Yes, you can. Please do. I would like to see this because I always ask if of the first, do you still have it? And thanks for showing. Look at that. And look at that 5, replete with the Duncan and the star and the you can describe the gradation and the whatever, the coloring on the 5, because that's a sharp looking sweater, Matt.
It is. So the 5 colors, or the 4 colors, yeah, on the logo there, you have the founding 4, Metropolitan, Buffalo, Connecticut, and Boston. And the 5th
Mhm.
star is representative of the Minnesota Whitecaps, who came in during the 2019-2020 season as an expansion team. They'd been in the CWHL when that league folded. They bumped around as an independent team for a couple of years. And then they came in and almost immediately won and kept winning because
Some
the
good goaltending
Whitecaps,
there too for
very,
Minnesota.
yeah, very well run organization.
Yeah.
So this sweater has some great wear on it, and it was actually, in addition to having the 5-year anniversary patch on it, they had removed the patch from the Buffalo Believes Classic, which was sitting about here on the chest. That was an outdoor game that was played at Riverworks in Buffalo. And that year's edition, the 2019-2020 Buffalo Believes Classic, was actually the first regular season outdoor game in league history. So this sweater was worn in a very historic moment for the league. And because the PHF really didn't have, 3, 4, 5 sets of jerseys, this thing was also worn for most of that first half of the year. So as you
Mhm.
can see, it's got, a good bit of board burn right at the 2 there on the shoulder. There is a repair on one of the sleeves. There's some pilling at the sleeve where the glove was there. And then on this sleeve, there should be, here we go, a nice stitch repair. I don't know if you can see that in the light
Yes,
there.
absolutely. Yep.
So this jersey was worn. It had a bunch of scars and scrapes on it. It's actually missing a rivet for the collar right on the bottom there as well.
Wow, sure.
So this thing pretty much was put through the ringer. And as a result of that, I love it. It's got a great story behind it. It's got a great amount of wear on it. And that's the first jersey I ever collected. And then I went and got the Brat. I got a Mackenzie Blackwood jersey that he was wearing when he scored his first career point, assisting on a Damon Severson goal.
Mhm.
So that's off screen since he's no longer a Devil. Unfortunately, sometimes the purchases work and you get a budding superstar, and sometimes you get a guy that's on the Colorado Avalanche and is no
Right.
longer part of the Devils
And you know
organization.
what? Maybe he wins a cup and it's still part of your collection. You're like, now I've got a cup winning goalie, even though he's not wearing the uniform that I grew up knowing, loving, and desiring.
Exactly.
It's sometimes how it happens. So the bug bites, and you're like, I want to just do more and more with this. I love the fact that the Riveter sweater, by the way, it's not just, it doesn't just tell a tale, it's got multiple chapters, Matt. Like those are the sweaters that you look and you go, it's from this game and it used to have this patch and it's missing one of the rivets around the tie up and it's got, those are the pieces that really do make a collection as opposed to, and again, no shade, no knocking against anybody's collection. Hey, this was great and he wore it for the season and he scored 27 goals. Okay. Like those are neat. The fact that the Riveter sweater has like 10 different stories and it was used a bleep ton. Good on you, man. Those are the hobby stories that make me happy, Matt.
Absolutely. And that's the thing too, is, hearing from some of our collectors, we've got, collectors who do still buy, a significant number of PHF jerseys. I just love hearing from people who buy from us
Right.
and, hearing, oh, do you have, this Flyers jersey in stock? Oh, can I get this Predators jersey? I'm in for that coming into the warehouse. Especially, earlier this year, I worked my first expo in July. And, it was a real opportunity for me to go around and chat with collectors from our program teams who were not on our program teams. Really, this is a hobby that is an inch wide and a mile deep.
That's a great way to put it. It's a
And
great way to put it. Go ahead, continue.
if you know about it, you know about it. And if you don't, you're completely oblivious. I mean, at the expo this year, we had, among other things, for the first time, to the best of our knowledge, displayed outside of the Hockey Hall of Fame, Gretzky's jerseys when he passed Howe in total goals and points. And what we were able to do, which I thought was really cool, kind of was my idea. I want to take credit for it. We took the Ovechkin jersey from 895 that he wore at the tail end of the third period into the locker room celebration, and we actually put it next to Gretzky's 802 goal jersey and a jersey from Gordie Howe. So the top three goal scorers in NHL history for about 2 minutes at the expo, and maybe five total people, including one of the guys from the Hockey Hall, saw it, watched us snap a couple photos. It was just incredible. The stories, the connections, the community. It's amazing. I mean, where else are you going to find people who are willing to, show a level of trust in saying, hey, I'll trade you this jersey for that jersey. We'll do a handshake deal. It's really a beautiful and incredibly interconnected community. And it's a pleasure to be a part of, both as a collector myself and working at MeiGray and seeing it from the sales perspective now as well, too.
My new friend Matt Kass is bringing a tear to my eye as we continue with Tales from the Warehouse, Volume 64. Meet Matt. He is a senior editorial and sales associate at MeiGray, MCass, Kass at MeiGray.com. Get on the request list as we draw ever closer. What are you waiting for? Sales at MeiGray.com. Again, the teams that are already under the MeiGray umbrella, they're good to go. Check in, say, you know what, I'd like this guy, or I have heard rumors about this possibly you know how you get online? Email sales at MeiGray.com. You get contacted. Hey, your name is next. I mean, it's a deli ticket counter, but it's a very polite one. And if you already have corned beef, take a pass, but you'll get called, and they handle it very, very well. Then you can do, and we've talked about this before, you can do something like a pre-order, and you put a little bit of money down. You get to watch them, the player, wear your shirt for a little while, and then finally, when the set wraps up, it'll get shipped off to you, and it's a very, very cool experience. Before we started recording, you were showing me, and I want to get into sort of your day-to-day in just a little bit, but you were showing me some really, really other neat things aside from the game worns. And you mentioned doing communications for the Riveters, and I had a career, God bless, I was lucky enough to have a very long one in sports talk radio down here in Washington, D.C., and met people that I call friends still, even though I'm no longer in the day-to-day, in the communications department. And they were always great writers and great ambassadors over at the Washington Capitals PR/communications office winning awards, league awards, because they're really good at their jobs and they promote accessibility and they promote, hey, you want to do a piece, we'll see what we can do, interview this credential, and always there to try to make your job as easy as possible, because all the media is, we're conduits to help them tell their stories. I don't want to add to it. I'm not making myself part of the story, but they always give you the materials that you need, and they're always quite lovely. But the art of the game note, Matt, and I collected anything and everything from whenever I could. I'd come home with game notes, but you have some special stuff in that basically makes up sort of a devil's museum. And I'm certain, not knowing your age, and I don't need to know it, these predate your birth, my friend. And they're wildly cool. I was glad that I got to at least glue some together with some hockey cards that I remember from around that time. Anyway, please play show and tell.
All right, so the first item that I'm going to show is part of a larger package that I have. My dad and my uncle, who my uncle has since passed away, were at the 334 Club game on January 22nd, 1987 at Brendan Byrne Arena in the Meadowlands. So the backstory to that, any Devils fan can recite it by heart. 15 inches of snow, everything's shut down, but here's the problem. Calgary Flames are in town, and that's not a game you can make up and reschedule the same way if it
Right.
were the Rangers, the Islanders, even the Capitals, down the Beltway. So the Flames say to the league, and so do the Devils, we got to figure out what we're doing. So eventually they delay the start time by 2 hours. So the puck drops at 9 p.m. local time here out east.
Mhm.
And my dad is among 333 additional people beyond him who
Right.
witnessed this game in, if anyone who's a Devils fan can recall the Meadowlands, it was a cavernous building. It was probably 13, 14,000 seats. And
Super steep up top. I
yes,
went there a couple times, and it was you'd stand up for your seat, you go, I'm going over. And I've used this line before, but that's the first thing I think of when I think of that old arena.
so he's actually interviewed in the documentary that MSG Networks put out a couple years back about it. So every January, he'll get a call. Someone will be like, "Oh, I saw you on TV." So,
So cool.
so this is the 334 Club button
That's all.
that they gave to the people who showed up. You got a little clasp on the back there. It says the final score of the game, and I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, Doug Sullivan, who had his lone career hat trick that evening. I think it was Sullivan. My memory escapes me at the moment, but he liked to joke for years that, like, "Oh, I had a hat trick and nobody saw it." But
Right.
little companion video. I recommend watching the 334 Club documentary on YouTube. Uh, Give it a look, give it a watch. I have
Yes.
a
So
nonverbal role in that one.
I'm gonna add a little bit, and please, by all means, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've seen snippets about this too. So the snowstorm comes, they're short a referee,
Mhm.
the Devils are short players,
Yes.
and one of the trainers or equipment people is maybe gonna be one of the linesmen. Finally, the other referee shows up, the Devils, and there were some prominent players who housed together and had like a pickup truck. They all lived in the same neighborhood or maybe even in the same group house at the time. And it was players and would remember their names today. I don't want to get myself in trouble by talking out of my butt and making, whether it was a Verbeek or something. Like, there were prominent names in this house. Finally, that truck shows up with the players. And like you said, it was 2 hours late. And the game went off and everybody was happy. And it's just like a really cool piece of history in Devil's lore.
Yeah, 100%. And I grew up, every time I had the opportunity, I'd ask my dad about what it was like to go. He contends that there were fewer than 334 people there. In the documentary, he mentions that people were writing names of friends and relatives and, coworkers who weren't even there at the Meadowlands. And the video footage, I believe, backs him up because it was a sparse crowd on that
Mhm.
January night. So we have not only the tag, which I just showed, but we have the letter that they sent out to the people who were there. And we also have the T-shirt that they gave out as well. But those are both a little more fragile and have some personal address details on them. So obviously on a video podcast here, don't want to exactly blast out where people used to live. So
Of course. So there's that, the snowstorm, the 334 Club. There are also a couple very memorable games. And for those of you of a certain age, you will remember this. The there was the Summit Series, there was the Canada Cup in the mid to late 70s. I believe it was the Russian Red Army team and perhaps others. Again, it'll come back to me. Or please, by all means, email Matt and say, Scott was a moron. He forgot this. The Flyers hosted a very violent, like the Russian team left the ice, but the Russian team was like barnstorming through, certain NHL cities. I don't, whether it was the time or the political climate or what have you, I don't think they did anything like that. And again, I could be very wrong until like the late 80s. And they gave it another go with Moscow Dynamo and Riga and the Russian Red Army team. And they showed back up in the late 80s. You take it from there, Matt.
yes. So my grandmother, who took me to all the games when I was growing up and actually passed away in late 2013 and instilled me with a real love of hockey, she would go to the press box at the old Meadowlands Arena pretty much after every game, which for those of you, again, who remember the old Meadowlands Arena, the press box was in the lower seating bowl. They're very accessible. They had cutout entrances for media members to go in and out. So she'd go up to her regular guy after every game and she'd ask for the game notes. And so as a result, she was able to get media notes from a New Jersey Devils exhibition match against the Central Soviet Red Army team that took place on January 2nd, 1989. So I have the game notes here with what I believe to be the starting lineup circled. And the Central Red Army team was absolutely stocked with guys who would eventually become household names. Slava Fetisov, Sergei Starikov, Alexei Kasatonov, Vladimir Melikov, Igor Larionov, Vladimir Krutov, Valery Zelipuk, I could continue to go on. It is a who's who of who eventually came over from the Soviet Union and played in the NHL. So in addition to the media notes, including performance and records, I also have two other pieces from that year's exhibition. It is an official scorer sheet from the game.
Right.
The Soviet Red Army team won by a 5-0 final score, outshooting the Devils 28-17. Konstantinov, Baikov, Kasatonov, Fetisov, and Komutov were the goal scorers. And I also have, which came with the press notes, from the National Hockey League directly, a pronunciation guide from the 88-89 turnaround there, telling people how to pronounce the names of all the players on the Soviet roster. Because, now Russian players, European players, players from all over the globe, now it's a global game. Back in the 80s, it really wasn't. You were from Canada or you were from the US, maybe you were from Sweden, but few and far between. So here come these Russians with names that no one has ever had to pronounce before. So the league put out the pronunciation guide, and it's really funny because now we wouldn't give it a second thought. Kasatonov is just, it's tip of the tongue, easy.
Sure.
Back in the day, it was who knew how to pronounce it. And then in addition to those three notes, I also have a series, just the media notes from the following year. January 6th of 1990, they played Dynamo Moscow, also at the Meadowlands. So I don't know the final score of that game without looking it up because I don't have all the paperwork and the information for that. But back-to-back years, Soviet teams come in, they play exhibitions against the Devils, and as it turns out, a couple of those players would eventually don the horns and tail themselves. So
that's right.
Those couple pieces, I think, to me, are some of the coolest, show and tell aspects from my my collection there.
It doesn't have to be a gamer to provide a link, and it could be as simple as a piece of paper. But to you and to other hockey fans, those tell several stories. It's volume 64, Tales from the Warehouse, talking to Matt Kass, Kass at MeiGray.com. Check out MeiGray.com. Summer sale's over. We are headed towards hockey season, and it will be here very, very shortly. Get on the request list, sales at MeiGray.com. So, Matt, you started there in May. Tell me a little bit about your initial impressions and, sort of like a day-to-day type thing.
Well, I mean, having been there before to purchase, calling them on the phone, I had somewhat of an idea of what I was expecting when I walked in. But the coworkers there are really, they've become like family very quickly. Just again, for those of you who are consumers, who come to MeiGray to buy jerseys, Drew and Dave. We've had people pull up, looking for sticks, looking for jerseys. People who, a couple weeks back, we had a gentleman from Ohio who actually came out. A friend of his had said, "You have to go to the warehouse." He's in on business. He makes a point to stop in with us. And I think he ends up, getting a jersey for his friend and a couple of sticks to tool around at men's league. And, that's the kind of community that we've fostered here, is that openness and that willingness to, go the extra mile, lend a hand, take you down the racks of sticks for those of you who've been to the warehouse and know what I'm talking about, show you what we have, see if there's anything that piques your fancy that you maybe were not even thinking you were going to come and get. And then you get into the warehouse and suddenly something catches your eye and you're like, you know what? I'm going to add to my purchase order.
Need
And
to
so,
have that.
but yeah, the coworkers are just phenomenal. I work well with authentication upstairs, when I need to go in concert with them, photography, shipping, you name it. There is a
Right.
top notch.
You'll mop the floors, Matt. You'll clean the bathrooms. You'll make the fries during the dinner rush. I'll cut the sub rolls or the hoagie rolls, whatever you want to call them. I'm here to do whatever you guys need me to do because I love my gig.
Exactly. And that's really the other thing too, is it helps to have coworkers that you get along so well with, because you can say to someone like a couple weeks back, I had a few jerseys come in on consignment. First consignment I'd ever handled. I had no idea what I was doing, but
Right.
the people who had been there, gone through the process, knew what was going on. They helped walk me through it. And then the following day, I had another consigner come in, and I was just like, oh, this is easy. I got it. Send the jerseys over to the photo department to get photographed. Once that's done, send them upstairs to authentication. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes we get a program jersey back, and then it's just like, oh, well, we already know this is authenticated, and that's easy. We'll put it up on the website. Um, Sometimes it's a little more research, and that's really where, I have to really tip my cap to the folks in authentication. You know, for newer jerseys, it's like, okay, you go on Getty Images, you find the photo, it's very cut and dry. For some of the older stuff that we've authenticated, it is a real rabbit hunt to kind of like dig in, find a video clip, find an old newspaper clipping. It's really, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes. And I kind of liken it almost to when you see a duck on the water and it's gliding along and it's very placid and, it looks super calm on the surface, but underneath the water, the feet are going, and it's churning, but you don't see that churn. That, it's really what happens at MeiGray on a day-to-day basis. We make sure that we present, a very well-oiled machine, and we are.
Right.
I don't want to, make it sound like we're flying by the seat of our pants. We really are a very
No, there's a
well-oiled machine.
process, there's a protocol, and you have proven results. You mentioned, things coming in and whatnot, and you're doing a bunch of different. You're doing what you do, plus you're helping out and you're learning. Talk to me a little bit about what you've been working on. And again, don't have to name names, but are there, nice items that you've gotten your hands on and want to share? Like I got to work on this, or I'm working on this right now. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I'll tell you, a couple weeks back, I was actually working on a batch of jerseys that came in. Players were, your standard journeyman fourth liners, but the styles of jerseys were actually really cool. We had a Muteris from the Dallas Stars. We had a Mustard Cat.
Absolutely.
We had, all these different, unique, alternate jersey styles.
Rare varietals, they
Yes.
like to say in the wine business, although I'm not in the wine business, and that may be completely wrong, Matt. So continue.
And in addition, the first consignment I ever worked on, the gentleman who brought them in, a couple of these jerseys have since sold, but we had Brendan Shanahan's Red Wings preseason gamer from the year they defended their championship. Joffrey Lupul Ducks jersey from, when he became the first player to score 4 goals, including the game winner in a playoff game, in NHL history. So that came in. We had a John LeClaire shirt off our back night jersey that was personalized and autographed.
I
Um,
saw that piece recently. Beautiful
yeah.
piece, the black. Yes.
And really, honestly, there's some other stuff that's come through that I wish I could tell you guys about, but for the sake of not losing my job for being a leaker with loose lips, for the better part of discretion, I will hold. But
But stay tuned
yes,
and go to MeiGray.com because you never know what's going to pop up. And if you are looking for a specific player, sales at MeiGray.com. Continue, Matt.
yes. So yeah, the day to day is just really very, very nice. I come in. Sometimes if it's a slower morning, I get to, go around the water cooler and catch up with my coworkers, see how they're doing. Uh, but most of the time, my day is spent at my desk. If anyone's come and bought anything from me, they know where I'm sitting. I'm kind of just a little bit off and behind the partition there. So I'm really most of my day is spent working on our back end, which is where we put copy in for jerseys to upload to the website. One thing I actually just worked on today, we have a set of jerseys going up, or not jerseys, excuse me, game theater, which is our term for NBA warm up gear going up. We did have an NBA contract for a while, and we're
Hmm.
kind of clearing out our back stock. So it was the Oklahoma City Thunder from the 2020-21 NBA season. And so we have a bunch of game issued jackets, shooting shirts, pants, and I believe a shirt or a jacket, don't quote me on this, that we were actually able to photo match through our authentication team to
Wow.
SGA.
Oof.
So
Okay.
that we can kind of show you the photo evidence if someone's looking for it that he did wear before a game. So we've got that coming up. We're getting through. We actually have a pretty significant backlog of NBA game theater gear. So we kind of put that up pretty regularly. We get that going. So if anyone's a basketball fan, I know this is primarily a hockey podcast with the jerseys
Okay.
and
No,
notes.
sales at MeiGray.com works for more than just NHL.
It
So
does. It does.
yes, get your name on the list. Is there something that sticks out as a sort of a surprise factor with your job since you've started? Like, oh, I did, pleasantly. And again, you're not here to speak negatively about your job. You seem to be a very happy guy, Matt. And this interview is going swimmingly because you're a good talker and you like what you do and it comes across. Is there something that you're like, this was a pleasant surprise as far as your job goes?
Pleasant surprise. Well, I think for me, it is the fact that, again, I'm not going to say what jerseys are coming through because we do have our clients and we have, um, our confidentiality. And that's really another thing
Of
that people can,
course.
can sign with
MyGray.com.
us.
Just
Yeah,
keep hitting refresh. You'll see. It's a
exactly.
need to know basis. And when they get put up, you'll know. And you never know what you're gonna see. Trust me, it's why I get lost into wormholes at work. And my boss is like, can you please focus on your job and not go to MyGray.com?
Yeah, it's really, to me, this job is the culmination and the end point of all the stuff that I've done, from the middle schooler who browsed swartzlogos.net after school, at the library on his computer, to the guy that worked for the Riveters, worked for an arena football team, which I actually have some fun stories about that one as well. Anything that could have gone wrong that year did go wrong. We ran out of kickers. The players had to pay for their own housing and transportation. We played
Oh,
to 300 people a game in Cure Insurance Arena, which, as we know, that's where the Trenton hockey team is coming in
right?
26-27. Um, it was almost, as sometimes as stressful as handling multiple roles with the Riveters was, it was more unpredictable with the arena football team because, you were just dealing with anything and everything. The numbers peeled off the jerseys at our home opener. The league changed the playoff format on us in the final week of the season to avoid the indignity of a 3-5 team making the playoffs, possibly.
Change the rules in the middle. What is this, NASCAR?
Oh
Come
yeah,
on now.
no, it was.
I kid because I love.
I actually had to pay to get media members into our final home game of the season because we'd used up our allotted spots. But actually, the story kind of comes from there. I connected with the public address announcer for the arena football team. And he introduced me to the GM of the Riveters, and through the Riveters, I met Dave. And through striking up a working, relationship with Dave, that's how I eventually found my way to MeiGray. So while it was chaotic, It was definitely one of those things that I think really was pivotal for me in getting to where I am today.
All right, from the surprise to the, is there something that you've learned while working at MeiGray that collectors, and we all want to know what goes on behind the scenes as best you can share? Is there something where we may find it surprising? And I've done plenty of these, obviously, with people on the inside, whether it's Drew, whether it's Dave, whether it's Jim, whether it's Stu, whether it's Rob, whether it's you name it. I've spoken to them about this stuff, and you do get some interesting answers like, oh, yeah, before I worked here, I had no idea we were doing it like this, or mind-blowingly cool that we do this type thing.
Yeah, and for me specifically, I think the process of seeing how the jerseys come in, how the tags that we put on the jerseys are tagged. Like now that I'm here at the start of a new season, we just got some Washington Capitals jerseys in, the homes and roads. We send them out to our tagger. He, does his magic, sends them back to us, and then we send them to the team for final customization. Whereas
Hmm.
with the Devils and the Flyers, with Philly Express, we send our tags out, we get a population report back. There's so many different ways to get that process of the jersey begins life as a blank that was produced in that factory in Canada until you see it on the ice. And then the boomerang of that is when the jerseys come back to us, it's fascinating. They'll come in boxes, they'll come in bags. We pick them up from the arena. There's so many different ways that the jerseys find their way back to us into the warehouse to be sold. And that's basically, that's the most fascinating thing to me. It's not even really surprising because, in the world of sports, you're going to have, crazy moments where you have to get these jerseys back. But just seeing the lengths that people will go to, that we will go to on staff in order to make sure that these jerseys get to us, that these sticks, that these pucks, that these helmets get to us, it really speaks to the dedication. And that's kind of, to me, the most fascinating, if not, it's not surprising because I know how well we work, but it's probably the most fascinating thing for me, seeing that process play out, day in and day out, and watching the jerseys roll in, watching me closed out, checked against the population report, uh, and finally put up on the website because it does not go up on the website without going through, I would say, at least 3 or 4 rounds of double checks to make sure that it is what we say it is because our word is our bond.
Tales from the Warehouse, Volume 64. Meet Matt Kass, MCass, Kass, Senior Editorial Associate, Sales Associate. As far as your role goes, how do you think it helps strengthen the MeiGray team and the relationship building that is so key in this business?
Well, certainly never hurts to have an extra pair of hands answering the phone, taking notes, running messages to different departments when need be. And also, just, from my perspective, it really helps to get to know the clientele that are calling. We have our regulars that call us, we have our regulars that email us. It has been beneficial, I think.
Text.
Yeah, it's been beneficial, I think, for my direct reports, Dave and Drew, to not have to handle every single call that comes in. I can take care of that. I can handle, pre-orders. I can handle uh, invoices for payment if something's on layaway. Learning those roles and taking those responsibilities off their plate allow them to be more effective in what they do. And by extension, when they're running smoother, everybody else runs smoother because it goes up the chain.
All right, before we get out of here, a couple more for you. And you've been very gracious with your time. We're talking to Matt Kass, by the way, MCass, Kass, one of the new kids on the block at MeiGray. It's Meet Matt, Tales from the Warehouse, Volume 64. I'm going to give you a blank check, which I really don't have, but I'm going to give you a blank check. If you could pick one dream item from the MeiGray warehouse, what would it be and why? And I always sort of give the caveat, you never know what you're going to get with this answer. It could be a $40,000 sweater, or it might be this $750 sweater or a $1,200 sweater that's meaningful to you. Blank check. What are you buying?
Blank check. Well, this one's easy as a Devils fan. I am buying the 552 jersey that we have on our website from Brodur's first period in that record breaking game. Uh, while I was
I've,
not at the
I've looked
arena.
at it several times. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's one of those ones. I like to joke that essentially by working at MeiGray, I have the best collection in the hobby and I didn't have to pay a dime for it.
Right. It's just, look at it. All here.
I'm here. I'm in the warehouse. I'm technically an employee. That's by proxy my jersey. But
Yes.
if I were to have it for my collection, that of course would be my white whale. I mean, 552, which turned into 691, is a number that is not ever going to be, in my opinion, broken. There are so many different factors that lead into it. You have to start playing in the National Hockey League very early, no later than like 21, 22 years old.
Hmm.
You have to be durable and play, 70, 75 games a year in an era where goaltenders just don't do that anymore. They're platooning now with a 1A, 1B to keep goaltenders fresh for the playoffs. You have to avoid significant injury for most of your career. And outside of the groin tear that he suffered when Scott Clemenson came in and very admirably backed him up, Brodeur was free from injury. And you have to have longevity and want to continue playing. And so
Right.
those four factors to me kind of make 552 special, and that would really be my dream to own. So we'll see. Right now, got a couple other major, financial expenses, all good stuff, mind you. But I got
Good.
another couple major financial expenses coming down the line. So I think at this point, 552 is probably going to remain a pipe dream, but happy to have it in the warehouse for as long as it's there.
All right. While I got you here, just a quick vibe on the Devils. I'm sure at some point we'll do a sort of a round table as we talk about the seasons we get closer. Preseason starting, as we record this, I believe 9 days away until the preseason schedule begins, and the season will start soon after that, obviously. But just a quick vibe on your New Jersey club as we head towards training camp.
Well, there's two questions, really, for me, three maybe. Uh, can they stay healthy? Because as we saw with Jack Hughes, his health dictates how the team goes. When he was, cruising last year, they looked like a real threat in the playoffs. He goes down in Vegas, and then the remaining 15, 20 games of the regular season to get into the playoffs were really just excruciating to watch. The offense dragged, there was no creativity. They had a lot of depth that, went out. And so health is my first thing. Getting Luke re-signed is another one. I do hope that by the time this podcast goes to air, his agent and Tom Fitzgerald have sat down and hammered things out. But as it stands, he's currently holding out for what I believe to be a better deal. Go get your money, kid. But also, you don't want to be a camp holdout, as we saw with Dawson Mercer last year. I think learning Keefe's system on the fly late really impacted his performance last year. And then for me, the other thing too is just depth. The defense is good, goaltending is good, but to me, the forward core is really missing a top line winger and a third line center that can slot up into the top six if need be as a result of injuries. The bottom six, fairly well established. I like what Connor Brown is going to bring to the table. I think Cotter, another year under his belt, is going to be another key performer in again that bottom six. Glass is going to be a very serviceable 3-4C. But again, finding that third line center, finding that top line winger, and if they can do that, if they can get Luke to sign his contract, and if they can keep Jack upright and with his shoulders intact, they could make some noise. But again, there's a lot of ifs, and as we've seen the last couple of years, there is no guarantee of health or good luck or contract harmony. So I'm just excited to watch the games. Any year where you can sit down and watch hockey, as I learned during the COVID, year when we were all inside. I never take
Right.
live sports for granted. I never take going to games for granted. And win or lose, I'm in with my team till the bitter end. So looking for hopefully a lot of horns, a lot of woos, and a lot of wins.
It will never not be a thrill to attend a live NHL event. All right, as we head into overtime, pretty simple one, and it's one that I've just sort of come up with on the fly. I don't know if you play golf. I don't know if you play mahjong. Who would be your foursome, whether it's for maj or golf, throughout the Devils'
Ooh.
lifetime, throughout the lore? And I'm sure Marty's one of them, and maybe Niedermayer's another. Maybe John McClane is your third, and you're the fourth. You could be the guy who rides on the back of the cart. I don't care. You can give me four plus Matt Kass. How about that? I'll make it a little easier for you. It doesn't have to be three plus you.
So my four for the Devils, obviously, got to go Brodeur.
Hmm.
He was my childhood goalie growing up. Really loved watching him play. Was distraught when he left. Was hoping he'd be a lifetime Devil. So he's one. Um, I'm gonna say Patrick Eliash for my next one.
Sure.
franchise leader,
Okay.
should be a Hall of Famer, and I
Number
will die on that
26,
hill.
I believe. Yes.
Yeah, the fact that he leads the franchise in pretty much all major statistical categories and hasn't even gotten a sniff at the Hall of Fame is, I'm going to say this, I hope it's not, sounding like I'm biased as a Devils fan, but if they can let players with fewer Stanley Cups and fewer points and fewer counting metrics in,
I hear you, sir.
I
I
don't see
hear
any
you.
reason why Elias, who is arguably one of the most influential Czech players of all time, isn't a Hall of Famer under those
Mhm.
credentials. So Brodeur, Elias, Stevens, and
I
I'm
knew it.
going to
I was
go,
gonna guess Stevens as
yeah,
your third. Yeah.
I'm going to go Sergei Brylin. Very underappreciated.
Interesting. Right.
He's the Now I know he's in the Ring of Honor, but he's the only Devil who was on all 3 Cup teams that doesn't have his number retired. And he was, a key guy on those Cup winning rosters. Played the game the right way. I actually had the pleasure of, when I was a news reporter, I did some sports coverage in the local area. I won't say which school because, again, I don't want people doxing the Breland family. But
Right.
his son was actually a player on the high school team that I covered. And he was sometimes in the stands, sitting watching the game, and he'd have his hands folded like a coach does, watching.
Mhm.
It was incredible how much his son played the game like him. You could see the body positioning and the hands and, the vision and foresight on the ice. So for me, it's Brodeur, Stevens, Elias, Breland
And brief.
is the 4 grouping that I would hang around with.
You're all invited to Matt's house to play Maj, and maybe you'll go play golf a little bit after that. Matt, this has been an absolute blast. Just a quick reminder, with the season drawing ever nearer, more near, closer, you know what I'm saying. Sales at MeiGray.com. Get on the request list ASAP. I recently reached out and found that the caps are again quite popular. So if you're interested in a certain player, but again, several teams under the umbrella, but just a lot more as far as inventory, and you never know what's going to come in on consignment. You never know what's going to be acquired. You never know what's going to show up at a MeiGray Expo table. You're like, it hasn't made the website yet. We just got done authenticating it, and here it is. I've been looking for that. You know how you solve that problem? Sales at MeiGray.com. Reach out to Matt. Good guy. Pleasure getting to know you tonight, sir. Kass at MeiGray.com. Until next time, this has been Tales from the Warehouse, Volume 64.